Welcome to this lecture on how to make an outline for your speeches. I want to make a few notes before we begin. First, this isn't just for this speech course. You'll need to do this for every presentation you make. And it's also really useful for essays, research papers, or pretty much anything you write with academic or professional significance, with a few modifications as necessary for your type of writing. Second, outlining is a skill. If you're doing your first outline, you might find it a little difficult to boil down the most important ideas you have into one document. Don't feel overwhelmed. It gets easier as you develop the skill. Third, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there are several tools that'll help you figure it out. This lecture is one, of course. Another tool that I provide you is an example outline to give you a general idea of how it should be structured. And finally, as always, if you're having trouble, you're more than free to contact me via email, Remind, or any other contact method I provided in the syllabus. So to start this, we're going to explore what an outline is, why we make outlines, and how we can use them in our public speaking. An outline is essentially an ordered list that shows the basic, most significant relationships between your ideas. It's what you do before you even begin the first draft of your speech. It's an organizational tool that helps you put your ideas together in a form that can then become your speech. The most common formats of speaking rely on having specific elements. So why do we make outlines? Well, in general, the most significant purpose of public speaking is to present ideas you have to an audience in the most optimal manner possible. You guys are pretty lucky. Some very smart people have already come along, done research about what works to fulfill this purpose, and wrote it all down for you. When we make an outline, we're taking what they figured out and using it to push our ideas into an order and flow that best works to get our points across. Finally, how can we use an outline to help out our public speaking? Well, as a pre-draft tool, it's great for refining the raw ideas you have in your brains into a solid speech. If you just got up and rambled off a list of facts and figures, your audience would leave confused and retain very little of that information due to being bored to tears. The outline helps you get all of that information into a more useful and interesting format. An outline is great for keeping you on track while you're speaking. You should not be reading directly from a script while speaking. Trust me, I can tell, and adults do not like it when you read to them. But memorizing a script for even a short speech is difficult. Your outline should be a single sheet or a note card that has the main ideas you want to touch on in your speech right there, which makes it great to have with you when presenting. Before we get into the step-by-step, let's quickly break down what an outline is and isn't in relation to this course and public speaking in general. To start, an outline is a fantastically useful tool to organize and refine your ideas into a speech. As I touched on in the last slide, it is also really useful as notes for when you're presenting. Finally, on a less fun note, an outline is required in this course for your speeches, so you might as well learn how to do it well. So what is an outline not? For starters, an outline is not the full script of your speech. You're going to need to say more than what you include in your outline on speech day. I promise that if you stand up on speech day and just read me your outline verbatim, I will know, and I will not be happy. Secondly, and this ties back into that first point, an outline is not a multi-paragraph essay. Your outline should be in sentences, not paragraphs. Each point can have a sentence or two, but if you're writing more than that, you're writing a script, not an outline, and I will ask you to try again, or just grade it as is, which you probably don't want me to do. Now that we've got a good understanding of how to meet expectations and not to peeve my pets, or is it pet my peeves? Oh well. We can move on to the 7-ish steps that you should take when making your outlines in this course. Step 1, although I really think of it more as step 0, is to determine the purpose and thesis of your speech. We break down the purpose into two separate purposes, general and specific. The general purpose decides what kind of speech you're giving. This is usually to inform your audience about a topic, persuade your audience to do something, or entertain your audience. Note, you can do more of these in one speech, but the general purpose dictates the general structure and flow of your speech. The specific purpose goes a little deeper. It takes your general purpose and then integrates your chosen topic. This will be a statement like, I want to inform my audience about, or I want to persuade my audience to, and then further solidifies your structure and flow. The purpose then goes on to further make your thesis statements. We'll touch more on thesis statements later in this lecture, but for right now, just know that your thesis statement is the single most significant idea you want your audience to walk away with from your speech. It's the idea that the rest of your speech is built around. Now that we have that decided, let's go on to step 2, where we need to go get information to put in our speech. Let's start with a basic fact here. This is not the New York Times opinion section, and you are not a subject matter expert. Don't come to me with, but what if I actually know a lot about this already? No, you're still not a subject matter expert. Every speech that you give that is not a report on something that happened directly to you, so pretty much every speech in this course, needs to be a researched speech. This goes to your credibility, which we'll talk about more when we explain how to do introductions. The basic idea is that you have no direct credibility yet, so you're going to need to borrow some from sources. This means you're going to need to find good sources. A good source is important. It's where you're going to get credibility. This means you'll need to avoid obviously biased sources. Think of something like PETA if your topic involved animals, or something like The Blaze or Mother Jones if your topic is political. And obviously unreliable sources, think of something like BuzzFeed, sources that are more for entertainment. When you're looking for sources, information from .edu or .gov sources can usually be trusted, although you still have to use your judgment and think about it. As a last note, you're not going to hear hatred for Wikipedia from me, but there's an important point behind this. Wikipedia is a great place to start, but a terrible place to finish. I should never see wikipedia.com in your reference list. The best way to use Wikipedia is to find a piece of information you like. Click that little source next to that sentence to find the original source they're citing, and then go directly to that source. You can then cite that source for the information you're looking for. In academic terms, Wikipedia is not a great primary source, but it is an amazing secondary source. While we're talking about research, let's quickly talk about citation. A citation is a reference to a source that you got information from. You'll need to have them both in your written outline, at the end of the outline, and in your presented speech. A good rule of thumb is that any information or thought that didn't come directly from your head needs to be cited. At the end of your written outline, you're going to need a reference list in APA style. I've included a website here that will answer all your questions about how to do this. This isn't just for this course. You'll be using APA for most of your college career, unless you're an English major. In which case, get ready for something called MLA form and a lot of confusion about the word container. Just get used to it for now. Not citing your sources in a reference list in your written outline is plagiarism, which, just so we're all clear on this point, is a no good, very bad thing. In your outline, when you're presenting the facts that support your main points, you need to cite them in the text. This is the most common mistake I see with citations and outlines. A student will have their sources listed in a reference section properly, but fails to cite them in the actual body of the outline. Again, the website I linked will show you how to do this. It's important to know that you also need to present these citations verbally in your speech when presenting the facts. You'll note that I've bolded and underlined verbally, and that's because I wanted to get the message across. I did try to get it emblazed in flaming letters across the nearest mountain, but that was denied by the speech department because it was, quote, too expensive and students won't even see it. But seriously, it's really, really important to understand this. Not citing your sources in your speech is, you guessed it, plagiarism. Yep, still really bad. You have to cite your sources. So doing it now, while you have the source in front of you, will help you a lot later down the line. With some juicy facts and figures found now, we need to figure out how we're going to organize them into the big ideas that will shape our speech. The classic speech format consists of an introduction, 3 major points with supporting evidence, and a conclusion. Your 3 major points support your overall thesis in your introduction. These really need to be the most significant things to know about your topic or your argument. A good way to think about it is this. If you were forced to tell someone about your topic in only 3 sentences, what would those 3 sentences be? If you're telling me about climate change, I don't really need to know about how scientists measure carbon dioxide in ice cores from the poles to track historical temperature levels. I mean, that's really, really cool, but not vital to understanding the problem. That bit of information would be good as a supporting fact for a big idea, but not the big idea itself. Note, I put this step before we write about almost anything else down on our outline. That's because the whole speech is shaped around the presentation of these ideas. You'll need them sorted out in order to write your introduction and your conclusion. They're tied directly into both aspects of your speech. To give an example of how to find the big ideas from your topic, I've put together a sample thesis and some sample big ideas on the next slide. Following on from the example I gave in the last slide, we'll use climate change as our topic, mostly because I've heard this speech so many times I feel my ears may fall off if I hear it again. We will assume that this is a speech to inform. So our example thesis here is, current trends suggest that, if changes are not made, there will be significant harmful effects to the worldwide climate. So, we go out, do some research, and find out some interesting facts. Now we have to decide what are the most important things to know. As you can see, I've decided here that the most important things to know about this topic are what causes climate change, what the consequences will be if we don't do something to change, and what we now know are the best options for change. Now that we know what the big points are, we can decide where to put the facts that we found in our research. But before we do that, now that we have the three main ideas the body is focused on, we can start on the introduction. Your introduction serves three major purposes in a speech. First, you need to get your audience's attention. Next, you need to give your audience a reason to listen to you talk about this topic. And finally, you need to give your audience a general idea of what you're going to be talking about and how you're going to tell them about it. We'll start with a hook, or an attention getter. Very few people want to sit and listen to 10 minutes of someone throwing up information all over them. It's boring. And because the throwing up information style of speech is the one most people are used to, do you remember history lectures in high school? The second most people sit down to listen to a speech, they get ready for that kind of experience, and you've already lost their attention. But we kind of want our audience to be paying attention to us, right? So we hit them with a hook. This is some sort of rhetorical device that we're going to use to grab their attention back from whatever it is that they're daydreaming about. This could be a story, an interesting quote, a significant statistic, or a hypothetical situation, just something that will make most people do a double take and sit up in their chair. It should be related to your topic, though. While lighting off a couple of firecrackers at the start of your speech will definitely get people's attention, it's also likely to distract them and make them wonder what it has to do with your speech, and also your neighbors might not appreciate the noise. Once you have all eyes on you, you'll move to the credibility statement. Remember when I said earlier that you are not the subject matter expert and you need credibility? To put it simply, credibility is a form of trust. It's a reason for the audience to believe that what you're telling them is both important and accurate. Right now, you're just some person. Why should I believe you? Your credibility statement needs two things: a reason for the audience to care about the topic, and a reason that you should be the one telling them about it. Most professional speakers will go for ethos here. They'll tell you about the letters that go on after their names or how long they've worked on the field, but you don't have that luxury. Instead, you need to break out the logos and pathos and provide a logical or emotional reason, preferably both, as to why this topic matters and why you are talking about it. Now we can get to the big one, a strong thesis sentence. Like I said earlier, your thesis statement is the single most significant idea you want your audience to walk away with, the idea the rest of your speech is built around. You will introduce your thesis in your introduction, support it in your body, and reinforce it in your conclusion. You really need a strong thesis in order to have a good skeleton to flesh out your speech. Often, you'll find that after you've done your research, gained a better understanding of the topic, and figured out your big ideas, you may want to change your thesis around a little bit. This is totally normal. I found that on more than one occasion, that by the time I got to writing my introduction, I had a completely different outlook on the topic and wanted to take my speech a different direction than I thought I did when I started outlining. With your thesis solidified, the final part of your introduction is your preview statement or roadmap. It's a little movie trailer of how your speech is going to go for your audience. In this statement, you'll tell your audience what your big ideas are, give them specific points to look for, and generally just give them an idea of how you're structuring the speech. Not only does this help keep your audience interested, who doesn't love a little suspense, but it also helps them keep track of where in the speech they are if they got lost somewhere in the body. This is something a lot of people miss, and it's a really important part, so please don't forget it. Next, we're going to get into your supporting facts or subpoints. For each big idea main point, you should have 2 to 3 subpoints. These will generally be an example of the main point, a detail going deeper into the main point, or some of your supporting research from step 2. Each main point needs at least one piece of cited information. Remember, you need 3 citations in your speech. Make sure one is in each main point. There are 3 main purposes of a conclusion. First, you want to remind your audience of your thesis, so you'll need to restate your thesis statement. Next, you want to remind your audience of your main points, so you'll need to restate your 3 main points. But please be creative about how you restate them. Avoid simply stating verbatim the exact same sentences you used in your introduction. Finally, you want to tie together your arguments and facts in closing statements. Your closing statements are the last 2 to 3 sentences of your conclusion. In these statements, you're trying to make a final argument about how your points support your thesis. Remember, you should always link back to your attention-getting device, usually in the last line of your conclusion. This helps to cement your ideas in your audience's memory. If your attention-getting device is strong, it'll be one of the most easily remembered parts of your speech for the audience. Putting it at the end, as well as the beginning, helps your audience to tie all that information together in a neat little package, and it makes it more likely for the audience to actually absorb the information you're providing. You know, we can't forget this thing here at the end. There should be transitions between the introduction, each major point, and the conclusion. Transitions serve as signposts to help the audience know when you're switching to another place in the speech. It helps keep them clear about where they are on that roadmap we talked about. It could be something simple, such as the word next or finally, or it could be something more complex with the use of a summary such as, now that we know about the causes of climate change, we can turn to solutions. Whichever way you decide to go, be sure that there are transitions between all those parts. So there you go, outlining in 7-ish easy steps.